Yesterday, we got a brand new announcement, courtesy of IGN Turkey, who apparently had an exclusive who didn't tell anyone, including Ubisoft. But today, we found out for reals that there is a new Ubisoft game coming next year, in fact, February 16th. Far Cry.
Early February.
Early February?
Late February.
Yeah.
Early in the year, late February.
Okay, Far Cry Primal is what it's been said. There's a trailer out for it at the moment, which apparently has got a bunch of gameplay showing off the game in action. Justin, first of all, what do we know exactly about Far Cry Primal?
Well, we know that it's a Far Cry game, obviously. I mean, when you see the trailer, you see the gameplay. Like, this is obviously very clearly a Far Cry game. You're going to be exploring. You have the kind of cool melee weapons, bow and arrow, spear. Like, the gameplay definitely feels reminiscent of the Far Cry series. And in this game, but you don't have guns. You don't have a lot of the other mainstays of the series. Instead, you're going to be set during the Ice Age. You're going to be looking for and fighting against other cavemen, basically. And it's not clear how that gameplay is going to work out, whether it's going to be a multiplayer game or whether it's going to be something like Rust or like completely survival, not survival horror, but a survival game within that atmosphere. But you are going to be fighting against these guys both for territory and you see people taking down woolly mammoths, fighting against saber-toothed tigers, like the animals that were alive during that period and trying to survive and create your own weapons and be in that environment.
It's interesting because that whole Rust, the survival, like even Minecraft survival maps, and there's a bunch of, especially in the PC space, there's a bunch of games, first-person games primarily, which are about, getting equipment, building up defenses, fighting antagonists. Like The Forest is a game I played a lot of last year, which is very much like that. But most of these games tend to be multiplayer focused because of the very reason of like creating AI that will able to be work in teams is quite difficult. But when you look at this trailer, a lot of this looks like it's single player linear stuff, right?
Well, like a standard Far Cry.
What I'd read in the feature that we actually posted on the site earlier today is that it is, according to the developers, they say it's a single player focused experience. I don't think that rules out multiplayer necessarily. It's possible that there will be a multiplayer component in addition to any single player. But what I've read so far, it is single-player focused, and in theory, you are a character who tames the wilderness.
Right.
Is a quote from one of the developers. So I have a feeling we're going to be, instead of riding jet skis and gyrocopters, we might be riding mammoths or saber-toothed tigers or other era-appropriate animals.
And shooting humans and shooting animals and doing all that good work. So let's talk about that then. That's the sort of interesting thing. Scott, we were talking before we went live about how Far Cry is sort of a mainstay of a first-person shooter. It's kind of the game that popularized, at least in the mainstream, the idea of the open world shooter, which has become sort of ubiquitous over the past couple of years. Yeah. But it's very much a game about like outposts and shooting people with guns and big explosions. So there's a lot of interest in like, this is very much, incredibly different to Far Cry, thematically at least.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how they compensate for the lack of technology. I mean, especially given that Far Cry 3 and 4 were so vehicle-driven. I mean, again, I had just mentioned the gyrocopter, and you had all these, sea vehicles, commonly known as boats.
Yes.
Although you also had like jet skis and other things. That's sort of what I meant.
And trucks and jeeps, like a lot of the game.
Of course. That's all been around even since like Far Cry 2. So yeah, given that
since Far Cry 1.
Yeah. It'll be interesting to see how that impacts the gameplay. I mean, in theory, you can throw a spear. You can I saw there are bows and arrows apparently in the trailer, so they can sort of compensate for the lack of automatic weapons in certain ways, but. Yeah, it's just thematically it's going to be so drastically different. It'll be interesting to see which gameplay pillars actually carry over and how much it feels like a Far Cry game. I mean, I think, outposts are a really interesting example. I mean, that has become a mainstay of the Far Cry experience, is, clearing out enemies from a particular territory and claiming it for yourself. And it's an idea that was even carried over into Assassin's Creed, greater and greater importance.
In fact, a lot of carryover between all of these series, including Watch Dogs and everything. So,
absolutely.
Are we going to have outposts in Far Cry Prime where you're like, going up to the top of a woolly mammoth and hitting Y and looking around?
Well, I think there has to be some aspect of that, some part of that gameplay. The interesting thing is, if it's not going to be a multiplayer-focused game, this is obviously a game where you have a group. Like, you see the whole cutscene behind you where you're not just a lone wolf taking down this woolly mammoth by yourself. You have a group of guys behind you. Are you always going to have this PC group kind of following behind you and helping you out, taking over these things?
It's interesting because we're looking at the Far Cry 4 intro here, and like we see a lot of this before a game like Far Cry comes out. Like Far Cry 3, the story trailer they had was all about you and your buddies and whatnot. And in both cases, all of this stuff was like done and dusted within the first 5-10 minutes of the game. So I wonder if a lot of what we're seeing of Primal as well is, just the setup, and then eventually you're sort of left to your own devices, and it's not as linear as you think.
That seems to be the case, again, from the article that I was reading earlier today. Your character is the last surviving member of his hunting party, is what I've read.
Yeah.
So in theory, yes, all of the people you see in the trailer who you're hunting with are all going to be dead.
Well, that's going to be a lot easier to make.
Yes, that's true.
We saw how difficult it was for Valve to get Alex Vance to, play along for an entire game. So I imagine like 3 other people will probably be a bit too much.
Yeah, I have a feeling there are going to be some casualties pretty early on in that game.
Yeah, sounds like it. Lots of emotions, I imagine.
Yeah, so many, all the emotions.
So I guess prehistoric games are the new thing, 2016, right?
Are there other, wait, what prehistoric games am I forgetting? Well,
Ark.
Well, okay, prehistoric looking.
Well, so the one that I had mentioned prior to us rolling, which I don't know if you're hinting at, but
Yes.
Horizon Zero Dawn, which was a hit at E3 and has kind of been pretty dormant since then, as far as I know. I haven't seen much coverage of it. But it has a similar, like, you are a hunter fighting against the wilderness, and you have, bow and arrow, and you're sneaking through the brush against, outnumbered or not outgunned, but like out-teethed. I don't know. When you're fighting dinosaurs or other. Yeah, and obviously that's like a post-apocalyptic setting, so you have leftover technology from the modern era, and Primal will not have that since it takes place, the BC era. But still, like, you can see thematic similarities. Again, it has an end of the world kind of vibe, Horizon. So it'll be interesting to see how similar those two games end up being. But I immediately thought of Horizon when I saw the trailer for Primal.
Yeah, very much, I guess, in terms of its aesthetics anyway, very similar. And also in terms of the hunting. So it's going to be interesting whether this lands closer to Horizon Zero Dawn or whether it lands on the other side, Justin, the Rust side of things, where it's very much a game that is a sandbox. It's not actually this linear sort of story-led thing, because Far Cry kind of skirts that line, right? There is a story happening, but really it's sort of like an open world sandbox for you to fuck about in.
And they've said, they've made it clear that it's not just going to be like the other games where you're finding all these weapons. You are going to be crafting and creating and trying to discover basically new technology. I mean, everything's going to be new technology, but like I don't know if there's going to be a huge difference between like using a whale jaw or using a bear jaw versus using a wolf jaw. Like, what if you find a whale? Yeah. All the weapons you could make out of a whale.
Yeah, whales back then.
You're going to be literally inventing everything.
Yeah.
It's going to be like you're going to be the person who made fire.
You're the wheel.
Yeah. You're going to like television.
The internet.
You're just going to, it's like...
all this knowledge you already have going into the game.
I know. I want to play the game where you're playing as somebody in like prehistoric era with the mind of somebody from 2015.
What if they're just M. Night Shyamalaning us? What if this is like The Village? It took place in 2015 all along. Like the game ends with like, the characters from Far Cry 3 crashing into like, wait a minute, and it just turns out it wasn't prehistoric times
you
at all.
blink and you see an Abstergo logo in your
exactly.
eyes, and you're like, no!
It's all coming together.
Well,
damn it.
So the thing that Horizon has is that it does have these huge creatures and beasts that you're fighting against. Is that kind of stuff going to exist in Far Cry at all? I mean, Far Cry, they've established that this is somewhat realistic, but Far Cry also takes a lot of liberties with reality, and that's something that I want to see in Far Cry
To its benefit, mostly, as well.
It makes it fun, it makes it exciting, and I want to see dinosaurs. You can't have... I know it doesn't, I know that didn't exist. Dinosaurs did not exist at the same time as man. But I still want to take down a T-Rex.
Hey man, if Tomb Raider 1 can get away with it, I'm sure Far Cry can get away with it this time. Last question. Obviously, when we see a unnumbered title to a Far Cry game, immediately comparisons to stuff like Blood Dragon comes along. Do either of you know if this is going to be full price? Do we expect it to be, mid-range? It's not DLC, you know that.
I don't think they've been very clear on the price. I mean, it's coming out very soon. It's
very soon.
It's going to be based on Far Cry 4, obviously, so I think that'll limit what they have to put into the game. That doesn't mean it's not going to be a full experience, like a full AAA game. Does that mean that they're going to offer it at a lower price because they were able to put it out more quickly? Maybe, maybe not.
I wouldn't be shocked if it's a Blood Dragon kind of situation, if it was like a $40, very substantial standalone, but not a full title, given that it isn't numbered, it is coming out very soon. And in fact, it leaked sort of a day early, it seemed. But the fact that, I hadn't heard anything about this until yesterday. So that's pretty impressive. We made it through con season and E3 and PAX and blah, blah, blah. never heard a word about it.
Like, I mean, leaked early, but it's still coming out in about 4 months.
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
so like I honestly don't know what to expect. We haven't really received indication from Ubisoft one way or the other.
Yeah.
I mean, again, the fact that it's not numbered leads me to believe that it could be a Blood Dragon situation, but who knows? It could be a full $60 wide, deep experience.
All right, time will tell. We'll have to find out. So thank you very much, Justin and Scott, for coming out, talking all about Far Cry. And thank you for watching. Let us know what you think of Far Cry Primal. Are you looking forward to it? And I guess the main question is, would you like it to be a $60 game, or would you like something a little bit smaller like Blood Dragon? Not many games coming out in February, so maybe the former for me. Let us know in the comments below.